There comes a moment in every person's life when the world feels heavy, not because of what it demands, but because of the things we demand from ourselves after looking at others. A moment when the simple act of opening your eyes in the morning feels like stepping into a battlefield you never chose. A battlefield where the enemy is not the world, not circumstances, not fate, but the comparisons you silently make between your life and the lives around you. From the very first breath of the day, the heart begins measuring itself against invisible rulers. You look at the world and see people moving, achieving, shining, rising, smiling, and somewhere inside you begins a soft but constant whisper. Why not me? Why am I always behind? Why am I never enough? That whisper grows louder with time until it becomes the soundtrack of your days, quietly shaping your sense of self-worth. It is a quiet pain, so quiet that no one notices it but you. A pain you carry in your chest like a stone. You walk around with it, pretending everything is fine, pretending you are strong, pretending you don't care. But deep inside, you feel yourself sinking, slowly, steadily, silently. You tell yourself it's normal. Everyone compares, right? Everyone scrolls through those photos, those announcements, those perfect lives. Everyone sees successes that are not theirs and feels something break inside. But even though it's common, it doesn't hurt any less. It doesn't become easier to swallow. It doesn't make the nights less restless. The nights when you lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why your life never seems to match up to the world you see around you. And beneath all the noise, beneath all the pressure, there is a longing to be seen, a longing to be enough, a longing to finally feel proud of who you are without needing to stand next to someone else to measure your worth. But this story is not just about the pain of comparison. It is about what lies beyond it. It is about the transformation that begins the moment you choose to turn inward instead of outward. The moment you begin to understand that the only life you are meant to live is your own, at your own pace, in your own way. It is the story of a young man who, like so many, spent years drowning in the shadows of others. A young man who believed that his life had meaning only when compared to someone else's. A young man who learned, painfully, slowly, beautifully, that the greatest peace comes not from catching up to the world, but from catching up to yourself. And so, his journey begins with the same question many of us carry but never speak aloud. Why does everyone seem ahead, and why do I feel left behind?
Living in shadows. His name was Elias, though you could give him any name, because his story is the story of countless people who move through life feeling like they're always one step behind the rest of the world. From the moment Elias opened his eyes each morning, he felt the quiet weight of not being enough settle over him like fog. He didn't wake up excited for the day. He didn't wake up feeling hopeful, confident, or ready. He woke up tired, not from lack of sleep, but from carrying a burden no one else could see. He would look at his reflection each morning and search for answers in the lines of his face, in the tiredness beneath his eyes, in the uncertainty that sat quietly behind every breath he took. What is wrong with me? He often wondered. Why am I never where I'm supposed to be? Elias moved through life as though walking beside a long row of invisible mirrors. Every person he passed became a reflection of what he lacked. Every success he witnessed became proof that he was still stuck, still stagnant, still falling short. He watched classmates earn better grades without trying. He watched friends find opportunities that he couldn't even dream of. He saw people younger than him accomplishing more, people older than him living their dreams, people his age accelerating past him like they were born ready for the world. And each time he saw someone else succeed, he felt his heart tighten, not because he didn't want them to win, but because their victory felt like a reminder of his own slow progress. It felt like life was handing out blessings to everyone except him. He tried to hide these feelings. He tried to smile, socialize, and pretend that he was unaffected. But comparison is a slow poison. It doesn't destroy you all at once. It wears you down quietly, drop by drop, until one day you realize you no longer remember what your own dreams looked like because you've spent so long looking at someone else's. Elias walked into classrooms, workplaces, gatherings, always with that same shadow trailing him. He would overhear people celebrating achievements, making plans, talking about their futures with bright eyes and confident voices. He would listen politely, smile when expected, nod his head as though happy for them. But inside, a familiar sting would rise, sharp and undeniable. Why am I not there yet? Why can't I be like them? What is wrong with my path? Why does my journey feel so slow? These thoughts followed him like echoes he couldn't escape. Even moments that should have brought joy, small successes, kind words, decent progress, were overshadowed by the thought that someone else was doing better. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't bitterness. It was fear. Fear that life was passing him by. Fear that he was missing something. Fear that there was some secret everyone else understood except him. He would scroll through his phone during breaks, seeing pictures of people celebrating milestones, new jobs, new cars, new relationships, new achievements, new beginnings. Every swipe felt like another small cut, another reminder that he wasn't enough, that he wasn't moving fast enough, that he wasn't becoming the person he was supposed to be. And the sad truth was, no one knew. No one knew the battles he fought in silence. No one knew how deeply he felt the comparisons. No one knew how much it hurt him to see others move forward while he felt stuck in place. People around him thought he was quiet, maybe introverted, maybe shy. But Elias wasn't quiet. He was drowning. Drowning in thoughts he never spoke. Drowning in expectations that weren't his. Drowning in standards he never chose but felt forced to live up to. Drowning in a world where everyone's journey looked perfect, except his own. Every day he tried to outrun the feeling that he wasn't enough. But comparison doesn't just slow you down. It chains you to emotions you don't understand, pressures you never asked for, and fears you don't know how to silence. And so Elias lived his days in the shadows, smiling on the outside, sinking on the inside, waiting for something, anything, to help him understand why his life felt like it was never measuring up. He didn't know it yet, but the journey he was about to take would not only change his understanding of success, it would change his understanding of himself.
The morning sun rose gently over the quiet neighborhood, but Daniel felt none of its warmth. He walked down the street with slow, heavy steps, as if each foot carried the weight of a thought he couldn't let go of. His backpack pulled at his shoulders, though it was almost empty. What truly made him sink wasn't the bag, it was the silent pressure inside his chest. Everywhere he looked, the world reminded him of what he wasn't. A boy jogged past him, fit, confident, energized. A girl across the street laughed with her friends, easygoing, carefree. A man stepped out of his car, dressed sharply, keys from a new model dangling in his hand. Daniel's eyes followed each person, and in that moment, he quietly measured himself against them, finding himself smaller every time.
As he approached the school gates, his thoughts grew louder. Why can't I be like him? Why does everyone seem ahead of me? Why am I always less? He reached his classroom and sat at his usual spot, the third seat from the back, next to the window, where the sunlight never seemed to fully reach. His classmates chatted, compared achievements, shared plans, showed off good grades. Their voices blurred into a single overwhelming reminder that he was falling behind. Someone passed by his desk holding a certificate. Another laughed about their weekend project winning first place. Someone else talked about getting accepted into a prestigious workshop. Daniel shrank into himself, as if he wished he could disappear into the wooden cracks of the floor. Even during lessons, he found himself drifting into dangerous territory, self-judgment. Whenever the teacher asked a question, Daniel avoided eye contact, not because he didn't know the answer, but because he worried his voice wasn't worth hearing. At lunch, he sat alone with his tray, the food untouched. His friends invited him over, but he waved them off, pretending he needed to finish something. He didn't want anyone to see the storm in his eyes. His mind wandered to social media later that evening, scrolling, swiping, watching flashes of other people's lives. Everyone seemed happier, better, more successful. Achievements stacked like trophies, smiles brighter than the screens they were shown on. But in reality, he was comparing his raw behind the scenes to their carefully chosen highlights, a battle he was destined to lose. As night fell, Daniel sat at the edge of his bed, knees drawn close. The room was silent, yet inside him, 1,000 doubts screamed for attention. For the first time, he whispered something he had never said aloud. "Why am I not enough?" The words trembled out of him, fragile, honest, painful. It was the beginning of a breaking point, a quiet collapse that would, in time, lead him somewhere he never expected.
The next morning, Daniel stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The fluorescent light flickered slightly, casting uneven shadows on his tired face. His reflection stared back with puffy eyes, messy hair, and a faint sadness he couldn't hide anymore. He leaned closer, examining every flaw. The small scar near his eyebrow, the slightly crooked nose, the dark circles forming under his eyes. The mirror was merciless, yet he couldn't look away. "How did I become this person?" he whispered. He remembered a time when he was full of life, when he believed he could achieve anything, when he admired his own strengths and didn't care about anyone else's path, when being himself felt natural, effortless, right. Where was that boy now? As he stared longer, something inside him began to shift. For the first time, he didn't just see his reflection, he saw a timeline of all the moments that had shaped him. The failures that taught him resilience, the mistakes that taught him humility, the quiet victories no one else ever noticed, the strengths he had forgotten he possessed. A memory surfaced, him as a child, proudly showing his mother a drawing he made. His lines were messy, the colors uneven, but her smile was real. She didn't compare him to anyone else. She saw him, just him. "Why did I stop seeing myself that way?" he asked the mirror. He noticed something else too. The reflection didn't judge him. The person in the mirror wasn't his enemy. It was someone waiting to be understood, someone who had been neglected, criticized, pushed aside, someone who needed acceptance, not comparison. As he held his gaze longer, a gentle truth rose inside him.
He had been chasing the shadows of others for so long that he had forgotten to appreciate his own light. A quiet tear rolled down his cheek, not from sadness, but from realization. It was the first tear of healing, the first sign that something deep within him was ready to change. Daniel didn't smile, not yet, but he breathed differently. He stood a little straighter. The world outside was still the same, but he was beginning to see it through new eyes, a perspective preparing him for the transformation that lay ahead. For the first time in a long while, he whispered to his reflection, not with criticism, but with sincerity. "I want to know who I am." The journey had begun.
The classroom was unusually quiet that afternoon. The sun hung low outside the windows, casting stretched shadows across the desks, turning the room into a warm blend of gold and soft darkness. Daniel sat in his usual spot, absent-mindedly tapping his pencil, lost in the confusion of his own thoughts. Everyone else had left for the day, but Daniel lingered. Not because he had something to do, but because he didn't want to go home and face the silent weight of his mind again. As he stared blankly at his notebook, an older voice startled him gently. "You've been staying back more often lately," his teacher, Mr. Solomon, said as he gathered a stack of papers. Daniel tried to smile, but it came out weak, forced. "Yeah, just trying to catch up on some work," he muttered. Mr. Solomon studied him for a moment, not with suspicion, but with a quiet kind of understanding that only comes from someone who has seen countless young minds struggle in silence. "Come here," he said softly. Daniel followed him to the back of the classroom, where Mr. Solomon opened a drawer and pulled out an old wooden box. He placed it on the desk and gently lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, old, faded, worn from time. Some showed a younger Mr. Solomon standing awkwardly with classmates. Others captured competitions he had participated in, some that he had won, and many that he had lost. Daniel's eyes scanned the pictures with curiosity. "You were not always the confident teacher we see today?" Daniel asked quietly. "Confident? Daniel, I spent half my youth comparing myself to everyone around me. I thought I wasn't smart enough, talented enough, or strong enough. I believed everyone else had something I didn't." He picked up a photograph of himself receiving a second-place award. His smile in the photo was strained. "You see this?" he said. "I didn't remember this moment as a win. I remembered it as the day someone else beat me. I carried that bitterness for years." Daniel looked up slowly, feeling the weight of those words. "What changed?" he asked. Mr. Solomon sat down, folding his hands thoughtfully. "One day," he began, "someone asked me a simple question. If you weren't allowed to compare yourself to anyone else, who would you become?" He paused, letting the question sink into Daniel's heart. That question stayed with me. It haunted me, until one day it started guiding me instead. Daniel sat still, absorbing every word. I realized that I had spent so much time trying to be someone else that I had forgotten to develop the person I actually was. Comparison kills creativity. It kills joy. It kills growth. But self-acceptance, that is where everything begins. Silence fell between them for a moment, comforting, not heavy. Then Mr. Solomon placed a gentle hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You don't need to walk someone else's path. Your own is waiting for you." Daniel felt something shift inside him, a small but undeniable spark, a piece of hope, a fragment of clarity, a whisper telling him that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to live the way he had been living. As he walked home that day, The city around him looked slightly different, not because it had changed, but because he had. For the first time, he felt that he wasn't completely alone in a struggle. Someone understood, and that understanding planted the first seed of transformation.
The week that followed was a blur of quiet thoughts and slow steps forward. Daniel tried to change, piece by piece. He reminded himself of the mirror moment, the mentor's lesson, and the possibility of a different life. But change is never a straight line, and the world often tests you before it helps you rise. One afternoon, as he scrolled through his phone, he came across a post from an old classmate, a guy who seemed to have it all: a perfect life, perfect body, perfect achievements, a perfect smile. Daniel's chest tightened. The old thought slammed into him. There it is again. Someone doing better than me. I'm still behind. I'll never catch up. He threw his phone onto his bed and paced the room, frustration boiling in his veins. His breaths grew quicker. His mind spiraled. The more he compared, the smaller he felt. After a few minutes, he sank to the floor, gripping his hair tightly, as if trying to pull the overwhelming thoughts out of his head. "What's wrong with me?" he whispered harshly. "Why can't I just be like everyone else?" His voice cracked. Tears burned in his eyes, not gentle ones, but the kind that come from a storm that has been building too long. He felt the breaking point hit him like a tidal wave. He slammed his fist weakly against the carpet. Why is everyone moving forward except me? The room felt too small. His breath felt too short. The walls felt too close. But in the midst of that emotional collapse, something unexpected happened. His mother knocked lightly and stepped inside. She didn't scold him. She didn't demand explanations. She simply sat beside him on the floor, placing a calm hand on his shoulder. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't have to. She could feel the turmoil radiating from him. After a long silence, she whispered, "Daniel, you don't see what I see." He looked up, confused, tears still streaming down. "You see what everyone else has, but you never see what you have." Her voice was soft, soothing, almost melodic. "You think you're behind, but life is not a race. Life is a garden. Everyone blooms at different times." The words settled into Daniel's heart like water into dry soil. No one can be you. No one has your heart, your kindness, your way of thinking, your quiet strength. But you forget all of that because you're too busy looking at everyone else's gardens. Daniel's tears slowed. His breathing steadied. And in that moment, on the floor, surrounded by pain and comfort, Daniel realized something powerful. He wasn't breaking down. He was breaking open. This pain was the turning point he needed. This collapse was the beginning of his rise. This moment would become the foundation of the person he was meant to be.
The next morning felt different, not lighter, but clearer. Daniel woke up with a strange stillness inside him, like the dust of last night's storm had settled. His eyes were tired, but his mind was finally quiet enough to listen. He stood by his window, watching the world outside move at its usual pace. Kids rushing to school, people jogging past, birds hopping on the sidewalk. Nothing extraordinary, yet Daniel felt as though he was seeing it all for the first time. He remembered his mother's words, "Life is a garden. Everyone blooms at different times." The sentence echoed softly in his chest, like a small flame refusing to go out. For the first time, Daniel wondered, what if my timeline is different because it's supposed to be? What if I don't need to catch up, just to grow? He walked to school with measured steps, no longer chasing the shadows around him. The pressure wasn't gone, but it had loosened like a knot that had begun to untangle. During class, he found himself listening more, comparing less. When his classmates received praise or shared achievements, he didn't shrink away. Instead, he observed, acknowledging their success without using it as a weapon against himself. At lunch, instead of eating alone, he joined his friends again. His smile was small, unsure, but it was real. They welcomed him without question, without judgment, reminding him that the world was much kinder than the voice in his head. Later that evening, he opened a blank notebook. The first page stared back at him, white and intimidating. He wrote a single sentence: "Who am I when I'm not comparing myself to others?" He didn't know the answer yet, but writing the question felt like the first step towards discovering it. He jotted down things he liked: drawing, stories, learning new skills, quiet moments in nature. He wrote strengths he had forgotten: patience, creativity, empathy, and resilience. With each word, the fog of doubt lifted slightly. He realized that walking his own path didn't mean knowing exactly where to go. It meant learning to take one honest step at a time. That night, as he lay in bed, Daniel whispered something unlike anything he had ever said before. "I don't need to be perfect. I just need to be myself." The world outside remained the same, but inside Daniel, a new foundation was beginning to form.
Transformation rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or dramatic music. It comes quietly, through small decisions, new habits, and subtle shifts in perspective. For Daniel, the transformation began in ways he didn't even notice. When he woke up, he no longer grabbed his phone first thing in the morning. Instead, he stretched, breathed, and took a moment to simply exist. When he saw people achieving things he hadn't, he didn't feel the same sharp sting. Instead, he thought, "Good for them. My time will come too." He stopped comparing his chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. He stopped measuring his worth by someone else's timeline. He began seeing success as something personal. Not a competition, not a scoreboard, but a journey unique to each person. Slowly, life started changing color. At school, Daniel raised his hand in class for the first time in months. His voice trembled, but he spoke, and his teacher smiled, acknowledging the courage hidden in that small act. He volunteered to help with a project, not because he wanted approval, but because he genuinely wanted to grow. He spent afternoons practicing art again, rediscovering an old love he thought he had outgrown. His sketches were messy, imperfect, but honest, and each stroke of the pencil brought him a sense of calm he hadn't felt in years. Most importantly, Daniel started to appreciate the person he was becoming. Not the perfect version, not the imagined version, but the real version. And it wasn't just him who noticed. One day during lunch, a classmate approached him. She smiled and said, "You've been different lately, happier. What changed?" Daniel paused, thinking about everything: the mirror moment, the mentor's question, his mother's wisdom, and the quiet steps that followed. "I stopped trying to be someone else," he said softly. "I'm learning to be me." The classmate nodded, as if she understood more than she said. That evening, as Daniel walked home, the sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, the kind of sunset that demands attention. He stopped walking and watched it unfold. Slow, gentle, beautiful. A reminder that nature never rushes, yet everything happens exactly when it should. In that moment, Daniel realized something deeply comforting. He wasn't behind, he wasn't late, he wasn't failing. He was simply growing at his own pace, in his own time, on his own path. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough.
Growth is never a straight line. Just when someone begins to rise, life tests the strength of their new wings. And for Daniel, that test came sooner than he expected. It happened on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. The sky was gray, draped with heavy clouds. A soft drizzle coated the streets. Daniel walked home with his sketchbook tucked under his arm, feeling peaceful after a productive day. He had drawn something he felt proud of, a rare accomplishment that filled him with quiet satisfaction. But as he stepped through the door, he found his older cousin, Liam, visiting. Liam had always been the star of the family. Charismatic, talented, always achieving something new. Daniel respected him, but in the past, he also envied him. "What's up, little man?" Liam said with a grin. "Still drawing your little pictures?" The words were teasing, not cruel, but they hit Daniel harder than they should have. He felt old insecurities creeping back like shadows stretching across a room. Daniel forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm working on something." Liam ruffled his hair. "Good, good. But man, you should see what I've been up to. I just won another design competition. Got invited to a seminar next month. Things are exploding for me." Daniel nodded politely, but inside, something trembled. The old voice resurfaced, the one he thought he had silenced. "See? You're still behind. You're not talented enough. You'll never catch up." He excused himself and went to his room, closing the door gently. His sketchbook lay on his desk, but now he couldn't even look at it. His hands felt cold. His chest tightened. It felt like every step forward he had taken was suddenly slipping beneath him. He sat on his bed staring at the floor. The rain outside grew heavier, its rhythm echoing his heartbeat. Was he foolish to believe he could change? Was he naive to think he could find his own path? Was he destined to always feel second best? His mind spiraled, but then he remembered something. His teacher's question. If you weren't allowed to compare yourself to anyone else, who would you become? His mother's wisdom. Everyone blooms at different times. And his own promise. I want to know who I am. Slowly, the storm inside him softened. He realized something important. This was just a test to see if his growth would crumble under pressure or strengthen through challenge. He took a deep breath and opened his sketchbook again. His hands were still shaking, but he picked up his pencil anyway. Liam has his path, and I have my own. The lines he drew were unsteady at first, but they began to flow, shaping into something real, something honest. His art didn't need to be better than anyone else's. It only needed to be his. By the time he finished, the rain had stopped, and Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a long time.
confidence. Not loud, not boastful, but quiet, steady, and real.
Days passed, and Daniel continued to grow in small, powerful ways. He wasn't perfect, no one is, but every moment of awareness brought him closer to who he truly was. One afternoon, his school hosted an open showcase event, a place where students could display their projects, talents, or creative work. Daniel hesitated at first, unsure if he was ready, but the new version of himself, the version that was learning courage, pulled him forward. He decided to present one of his drawings. When the day arrived, the school hall was buzzing with excitement. Artwork hung from walls, science displays filled tables, music echoed from the stage. Daniel stood beside his sketch, feeling his heart pound. His drawing wasn't the most vibrant, the most detailed, or the most technically perfect, but it was truthful. It captured something raw. A young person standing alone in a field, staring at the horizon, waiting to become something more. Students walked past, admiring different pieces. Some glanced at Daniel's work. Some stopped. Some smiled. Some said nothing. But Daniel didn't shrink. He didn't expect anything. He simply stood there, present, proud of the courage it took to even show up. Then, something unexpected happened. A young boy, maybe 12 years old, stopped in front of the drawing. He studied it for a long time, silent, almost transfixed. Then he looked at Daniel. "Did you draw this?" he asked softly. Daniel nodded. "Yeah." "It feels like me," the boy said. Daniel's chest tightened, but not with fear, but with something warm and powerful. He knelt beside the boy. "Why does it feel like you?" Daniel asked gently. The boy shrugged. "I just feel lost sometimes. Everyone else seems to know what they're doing, and I don't. But your drawing, it makes me feel like it's okay." Daniel smiled. Not the small, careful smile he used to wear, but a genuine one. "Yeah, it is okay." The boy smiled back and walked away. Daniel stood up, breathing deeply, and then he realized something monumental. He no longer cared whether his drawing was better or worse than anyone else's. He no longer cared how he ranked, how he compared, or how he measured up. He no longer wished to trade his journey for someone else's, because, for the first time ever, he felt the purpose of being himself. Not impressing, not competing, not chasing, just being. And in that moment, Daniel understood. The true victory was not becoming someone else. The true victory was becoming who he was meant to be.
The days continued to unfold gently, each one carrying Daniel a little further into the person he was becoming. The air felt clearer, the world seemed softer, and his perspective, finally, was beginning to align with his heart. One evening, Daniel visited the park near his home, the place where he used to sit as a child. The playground was empty now, and only the silhouettes of trees swayed quietly under the fading sunlight. He sat on a wooden bench, his sketchbook resting on his lap. He opened it, not to prove anything, not to compare, not to impress, but simply because it brought him peace. He flipped through his drawings from the past weeks. Each page was a fragment of his journey, his confusion, his awakening, his growth, his resilience. As he turned each page, he felt as though he was watching the transformation of someone he once pitied, but now deeply respected. The wind whispered softly through the leaves, and Daniel felt something powerful settle inside him. A sense of alignment he had never experienced before. For so long, he had been lost in the storm of comparison. For so long, he had seen himself as incomplete.
For so long, he had believed he was behind. But now he knew something different. He understood that he didn't need to outrun anyone. He didn't need to prove anything. He didn't need to match someone else's timeline, because who he was becoming was more important than who he thought he needed to be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel closed his sketchbook and placed it gently by his side. He leaned back, looking up at the sky, a sky painted in pink, orange, and gold, as if the world itself was congratulating him for choosing himself. He whispered into the gentle air, "I'm enough, and I'm growing." Those words didn't feel forced anymore. They felt true. He remembered the boy at the showcase who felt understood by Daniel's drawing. He remembered the smile of his mother, the wisdom of his teacher, the storm he survived, and he realized something profound. Everything he had gone through, every doubt, every comparison, every painful moment was necessary, not because it showed him he was lacking, but because it led him to the most important discovery of his life. The only person he ever needed to be better than was the person he was yesterday. That night, Daniel walked home with steady steps, feeling more grounded, more alive, and more authentically himself than he ever had before. His path was no longer a burden. It was a journey, one he was proud to walk.
And so, Daniel's story reaches its quiet, powerful conclusion, not with a loud victory, not with a perfect achievement, not with the world watching, but with a simple truth, one that he learned and one that you were meant to hear too. You are not meant to be anyone else. You are not meant to follow someone else's timeline. You are not meant to fight someone else's battles. The people you compare yourself to are on their own path, shaped by their own experiences, guided by their own timing. Their journey is theirs, not yours. Your life is unfolding in ways you cannot yet see. Your strengths are growing quietly. Your story is building, even on the days you feel behind. You bloom when you are meant to bloom. You rise when you are ready. You succeed when your moment comes. And none of that can be measured by looking at someone else. So stop comparing. Stop shrinking. Stop doubting your worth. Look within. Look at the battles you've survived. Look at the progress only you know you've made. Look at the person you are becoming, slowly, quietly, beautifully. Your path is unique. Your soul is valuable. Your timing is perfect, even when it feels slow. And like Daniel, you too can whisper these words: I am enough. I am growing, and I am becoming exactly who I'm meant to be. The story ends, but your story, your real story, begins now.